Hi, everybody. I am Tim Schroeder. I'm the owner of Schroeder Amplification here in Highland Park, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. Today, we have the good fortune of speaking with Jim Thompson from Egglestonworks Speakers. Thank you for coming on, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I must say I've been a big fanboy of Egglestonworks for a very long time, and owner, and now proud to be a dealer. I think, and the name escapes me, but I think the first pair that I had was the original. There was like a two-way with the granite sides.
Yeah.
And
Isabel, probably.
Isabel, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love those things. Had them for a number of years, and now have climbed the ladder, of course, to the Vigintis.
Yes.
Yeah. So as with everybody, I kind of like to know a little bit about your history. Kind of, obviously, you're in love with music. Nobody who's been on this show because they got into it to make money. Usually, it's they have a love and a passion for music, and they figure out how to make that work in their life financially by starting a company or something like that, such as I did. So kind of tell me your history with and love affair with music.
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes I think this is a nonprofit organization, but music was a big deal in our family. My dad owned a music store when I was a kid, and it was mainly keyboards, organs, pianos. And I spent a lot of time in that store, spent a lot of time with him. He had an organ at home. He would go and play for, nursing homes and extended care places. And so he was always practicing at home, and what the folks wanted to listen to at the nursing homes were hymns. And so he was always playing hymns, and he thought it was the funniest thing in the world would be to play it whenever I had a friend over to spend the night, because the music room was right next door to my bedroom, and he would just blast hymns at 7 a.m. But despite that, I grew up with just music all around us all the time, and him playing it and us always listening to it. And so, it's just such a foundational part of all my memories as a child. We're just all music related. So that's the personal background, I guess.
Yeah. Did you grow up in Memphis?
I did. Yeah.
All right. Kind of a story that I can share with being in the South and hymns. My wife has worked for an organization. She's an opera singer, but also does vocal coaching. And she was part of kind of a memory care center here, where she'd give her time to go in and sing songs, etc. And it would just really trigger people. That they'd wake up, they'd kind of come to and be interactive and singing along with songs, and even though they didn't necessarily know what year it was. She went down to North Carolina to visit her folks, and she went into the assisted living place there and did the same thing, and not a single person knew any songs except for hymns.
Yeah.
And we're like, take me out to the ball game.
Nothing.
So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, the music. One of my relatives had Alzheimer's and was in an Alzheimer's clinic, and the music therapy was amazing, because they said for that minute while they were playing the music, if it was a familiar song, it was like they came back around. They remembered everything about when they heard that song, and the things that it shows the power of music and what it trips in your brain is just incredible.
Yeah, no doubt. Also, so let's kind of tune into the whole Memphis thing. So I know you've been a part of. You're very, very passionate about Memphis music.
Yeah.
About the area, about everything Memphis centric. And I know you've done a couple of pretty significant projects, kind of off the beaten path, certainly for a hi-fi speaker manufacturer. Sure. One of which being the Grand Central Hotel. Am I saying that right?
Central Station Hotel. Yeah, close.
I've only seen pictures. I've threatened to come down, but unfortunately COVID happened, and I will be there one day. But
right.
But it just looks positively spectacular, and it must have been an epic undertaking. Can you tell me about the process, how it came up, how you became involved in it?
Sure. Yeah. Most cool things like that start out with one person going, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if you did this?" And then you say yes, and then nothing ever happens. This one, that we said yes to the idea of, I think the initial idea was, what about putting your speakers in a bar, which high-end manufacturers get that conversation a lot. Like, we could use your speakers in this location, maybe in a public setting. The problem always comes up is that the expense most of the time outweighs the budget kind of, I guess, tolerance that developers usually have is not quite where we are. So, these guys approached me and said, would you like to do it? And, it could be your thing. You could design it. You could put it together. It would be, music of your choosing. And I did say, I said, it's great, but we need to talk about budget first before we go too far down the road and make sure that everybody's on the same page. And they were just excited. I don't think they ever said no to anything. They wanted this thing. It's a local ownership group, and they wanted this hotel to be, a jewel in their cap as far as their hotels. And so, yeah, we started out designing just the bar, and that turned into a little room behind the bar that's a smaller space, seats about 6 people, and that's programmed music in there with Vigintis like you have. And then we evolved into putting a custom speaker in every hotel room that pipes the music from the bar into the room. They have every guest has a little volume controller and a speaker, and they can listen to whatever we're playing downstairs. So yeah, it really got crazy as far as our involvement seemed to be. It was going to be very small at the beginning, and then it turned into everything. When you come to town and you see it, in the bar, there's a 2-story bookshelf that's filled with records that are all Memphis related, is what we term it. I bought every one of those records. I over about 3 years period, I went out and bought 3,500 records that all have some connection back to Memphis. So that was labor intensive.
That must have been really fun.
That was fun. Getting paid to buy records is, for people that like to buy them anyway, is fantastic. So, dream job.
Yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit specifically about that room, the 6-seater?
Yeah.
What kind of? I noticed that you have diffusion behind the speakers.
Right.
You have a subwoofer in there as well, right? But you don't necessarily make subwoofers regularly.
No, and that subwoofer, we actually did turn it off pretty early on because the room is small. So it's an old train station. It's 100 and something years old, and so finding nooks and crannies to use was difficult. The space that we used for that, we call it the listening lounge, but the space we used for that was originally going to be maybe a warming kitchen for the bar. And they moved that backwards and they put it in there. It's the ceiling, I think, in there is only like maybe 7'2". So none of the Memphis Grizzlies are probably going to hang out in there. But it came about because the developers came to the factory. They saw our room and they sat down. I did the demo that I always do, and of course it works, especially if you're not an audio person and you haven't been exposed to a lot of demos. It really works. And so their idea was, how do we recreate that in the space? And I was like, well, we got to build a room. We have to have a small room. And they got real creative. The architects got real creative about finding a space to put it in. It's a good size. It's I think it's about 15 by 25. So it's a good footprint.
Yeah.
Lower ceiling. They did go to a lot of extremes about treating the ceiling with an acoustic material, and we built a lot of panels for the walls. You can see in the pictures and all that. The trick was what we did with it as far as programming, because it was like, do we just play the music that's out in the bar? Do we play different music? How do we control it? How do we make sure people don't go into a dark room in a hotel and get naughty? So we made programming. So we have these podcasts that we produced about different Memphis music figures. They're 8 or 9 minutes long, and then there's music related to those. So guests can go in and pick their program. There's 15 programs to choose from when you go in, and if they're not playing, if somebody doesn't want to drive and just wants to be in there, there's a selection of some really great soul music that plays while it's on. So it gets a lot of great it's the review place. Like if somebody says they've been down there, that's the room that they want to talk about. And it's the fun thing. And it's such a weird, unusual thing to have something like that out in the public where people can just access it. But also at a hotel, you don't expect that. There's no sign really that tells you this is what's in here, and it's all discovery kind of thing. So it's unique for sure.
Oh, very cool. So what's the interface that people can kind of access? Is it kind of a stripped down program? ... Can they?
It's a touch panel, and it's all Crestron based. We've got amplification from Bryston in that room, and then I think all of the streaming. I mean, it's not really streaming; it's a server that's in there. I think it's a Blue Sound server that's taken over all of that. But yeah, people are in charge of choosing what they listen to. This is all things we had to learn on the fly, but we didn't let them choose the volume level. Because one thing is that when it's really a comfortable place, people will camp out and that becomes their seat for the night. And we kind of wanted people to rotate. So we got the volume level a little above, you can't really have a conversation in that room easily. So you're there to listen and pay attention. And then if you want to talk to the people you came with, you probably will leave the room and go out into the bar.
Wow, right on.
Yeah. So
how about your speakers and all of the rooms, etc.? Are those all Crestron based as well, or are those just?
No, so it's a very analog kind of old school system that runs off of the DJ booth that's in the bar. So the DJ booth in the bar is there's a DJ in there 7 days a week. We had rotating DJs before COVID, and then we just had to scale that back to one DJ during the past few months because hotel business has been hit pretty hard. But the rooms get the same music that's playing in the bar, and it's run basically over Cat5 to splitters, and then the splitters go to every room. I mean, to every floor, and then they split off to every room. So, and then there's a small plate amplifier installed that powers the speaker, just because we couldn't get line level all the way up 9 floors. But so it's it's interesting because before COVID, they would have a little sheet of paper in there that was the playlist for the day. It wasn't exactly, because that would be pretty hard to do because there's so much music, but it would be a sampling of the playlist and why you're hearing that music. Because when we talk about Memphis Connected, sometimes you hear a song, especially people would hear a song and say, now I know that song, that's not Memphis. And we're like, no, the guy that wrote it is a Memphian, or it was recorded in Memphis, or the connection is there somehow. So we use this playlist to convey that. I think they do it with a QR code now, so you can still find it.
So as the designated record shopper, you must have a vast knowledge of artists, etc., who are Memphis centric.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, it's funny how when we came up with the idea, there's a lot of, like, Memphis as a tourist attraction is music. That's the reason a tourist would come to Memphis. And along those veins, it's kind of the same kind of music. We're very heavy with the blues. We have Beale Street. Obviously, Elvis is from Memphis. Stax was here, so soul music is big. Mississippi is 20 miles south, and so there's the expected Memphis music is present in our collection. But what I wanted to do was kind of expand it to the music that was happening in Memphis after Stax. So what was happening, when Stax kind of went out of business about the same time Elvis died. It was just kind of like a black cloud over the city, sort of. But there was a lot of music still going on, and a lot of people still playing, and a lot of great music. And so we wanted to jump out and go into all the different genres and all of that. So getting out and buying music was a lot of fun. My partner and I, John, we would literally text each other almost every day with a picture of something like, guess who played drums on this, or, where was this recorded? And it, some of the stuff is just like a scavenger hunt that was just fantastic. And we didn't scratch the surface. There's 3,500 albums down there, physical albums, but there's 20,000 tracks of digital music that there's not a lot of overlap between the vinyl and the digital. So it's a tremendous amount of music. I don't think the DJs will ever get, bored with it, as a selection. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what's the Memphis music scene pre-COVID, of course? I mean, is it still thriving? You can walk kind of down a main street and go from bar to bar and hear something great every night, or?
Yeah, well, not down one main street. I mean, there's still Beale Street, and it's a tourist attraction, and it's kind of it's blues, and you can walk down Beale Street, and you can find live music on Beale Street where you could, and you will again. But there's a lot of little places all over town that you kind of you find, and you figure out where the stuff's being played and who's playing it and all that. So that's still going on. It'll pick back up. There's been some new venues that have popped up in the last 3 years or so that have really kind of fit into a bigger than a club, but not a real big performance space. That's kind of a sweet spot for a city like Memphis, is about 400 people, 300 people. That's a nice size. Otherwise you get into like the Orpheum, and that's much bigger, or FedEx Forum if you're a national act or something like that.
So in the back to the hotel, so you created kind of a custom speaker for all these hotel rooms. Is that correct? And is it mono? Is it just one per?
Yeah, it's just one speaker. We looked at doing two. It would have been cool visually and sonically. A little bit of budgetary issue came into it at that point, but we found a way to make that one speaker. So yeah, we did that one from scratch, and just made that one. Like, that one came out of thin air. That one didn't exist in any format ever before. The one that we have in the bar, that's the big one on the wall. If you see the picture, there's a white speaker that's on the wall with all those records. That is actually based on the Viginti. So that is kind of a wall version of the Viginti, if there's such a thing. But we had to augment that because the room has 35-foot ceilings and a lot of glass, a lot of brick, and a lot of restrictions on where we could put acoustic paneling, because it's a historic building. So we had to kind of spread the sound out. So we made these pendant speakers for the bar. So there's 6 pendant speakers that hang over the seating area, and then the wall-mounted speaker. And between them, we've spread it out to where you can listen and you can hear the music like you want to, or you can turn to the person next to you and have a conversation. Right. And that was pretty important. People always go in and they're like, I'm so confused by this room because I either don't want to be in a place that has a jukebox or has music going, or I just want to sit and listen to it. And you can do both if you think it through. So yeah,
that's very, very cool and unique.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of speaker that could quite possibly be brought to the commercial area? I mean, could you use it for desktop speakers for your computer or something like that? Or is it?
Yeah, I think if we were going to make it so there are considerations when you're hanging a speaker on a wall in a hotel room. One of the considerations is that wall is usually shared with the room next door. And so bass response was dialed back a lot. We didn't try to create something that could just recreate low notes. People that check into hotels sometimes are courteous and sometimes they're not. And so we tried to be ready for that. I think if we were going to make it a product, we would redesign it so that it was more full range. But we had Eric Franklin Shook from Part-Time Audiophile reviewed a pair of them. I sent him a pair of them, and he installed them on his wall on either side of his TV and actually took them to friends' houses and played them. There's a review, you can find it on Part-Time's website, but he enjoyed them. So, as far as he was concerned, he's like, you don't have to do much. There is a low end thing that you could add to this. He said, I just added a sub, but we'll see. I don't know. We're so busy with other things. I don't know that we've tested really what the market interest is in that.
Sure. There's a lot of things to do in the day, aren't there?
Thankfully, right?
So staying in the same vein, you were also part of something I believe fairly new, the Memphis Listening Lab.
Yeah. So that is about 2 years in the making. We kind of started that one before the other project was finished because we're gluttons for punishment. But they're connected, because when I was collecting the records for the hotel, I had them all here at the factory, and I would show anybody that came in, come look at all these records. And especially if they were record guys or music people or Memphis music people, they loved flipping through them and seeing these records. And one guy came in and I said, all I'm looking for is about 200 more records. That'll make the shelves look full. And he said, well, there's this guy who has a record collection, and I think he's looking to give it away or something. He didn't have all the information exactly right, but he told me the guy's name, this guy named John King. And he said, do you know him? And Memphis is a small town, but I didn't know who he was. So I Googled him later, and I felt like an idiot that I didn't know who he was. He's pretty, like, as Memphis music goes, he was part of the starting of one of our studios that's still around. He ran a radio station in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that was like, the cool radio station, and that's how he amassed this record collection. So I realized that he had about 40,000 45s and 15,000 LPs and all these CDs, and that even if he donated them to us, we couldn't do anything with it. Like, what are we gonna do with all those records? We couldn't store them, couldn't maintain them. Why would he donate them to us as a for-profit hotel? It didn't make any sense. Yeah. So usually you take a story like that and you just go, oh, that's cool. That's just an interesting thing. But I couldn't leave it alone that I heard maybe he was going to donate to a university, and it seemed like, as much as that might seem like it's open to the public, it didn't really seem like it was open to the public. And I wanted to know if he was interested in it being truly open to the public. And he was. And so we set up this nonprofit, and we've been building out this space where his collection will go, and it'll be open to the public, and people can come in and they can check things out internally. You can check out records and go to a listening station that has a turntable and headphones and listen to it. We'll also do live events when that comes back, and panel discussions and talks and things like that. It's going to be a real neat place. Be a listening room in there for smaller events. We're also putting in a couple stations that'll have music editing software that'll be free for people to use, and also podcasting production studio, so people can do that. There's a thing here at our public library where you can use, like, they'll have Pro Tools and Logic and all that stuff where you can make music, but it caps at 18 years old. So it's just for kids. So if you're older than that and you don't have all that gear and you don't have access to it, you're kind of out of luck. And so it seems like it will be attractive to a group. We'll see. Yeah. We hope this thing opens in, we'll be open in May. We'll be able to be open in May. We'll have to see what restrictions and vaccines and all that stuff does. But
that is a very cool idea. Very cool idea. So your speakers tend to be a little unique in that they seem to be equally at home in, like, mastering labs specifically, right? Are there any used for tracking?
Only one studio. I think the mastering guys are more attracted to it than what the mixing engineer's looking for. They tend to be looking for volume and a flat response that is almost not pleasant to listen to sometimes. So it's usually the mastering engineers for some reason.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that stemming just from the fame of Bob Ludwig using Egglestonworks speakers, or is
it sure doesn't hurt. He's the man. He's been on top of that heap for a long time, since the early 70s. So his use of our speakers came kind of out of the blue. He bought a pair of our smaller speakers, of the original Andras. Didn't really tell anybody, just got them and liked them, and gotten this kind of conversation with us about, I stand up when I master. I'd like to, if you made a taller speaker, maybe I could think about it. you only have to say something like that to people like us once, because we will just start, down the road and start making that speaker. And so we did. And yeah, we don't really market to the mastering crowd or the pro, it's kind of word of mouth and all that. It's great because it's such an affirmation to a customer that, dealers are able to use it as a really good marketing tool. So
no doubt. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure you've spent a lot of hours at Bob's place. I mean, I've got photos of being there, and of course in the main room with your speakers, and hearing a surround. Bob sat me in his hot seat and played a Mahler's Fifth in surround that he had just done. It was arguably the most incredible thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We every once in a while, Bob will tell us, about somebody coming through and who it was, or we'll hear directly from them, or they'll buy speakers, some artists, like the drummer for Tool, a guy named Danny Carey, has moved up and now has Ivies in his house. It's just crazy because of going to Bob's 20 years ago, listening to the speakers on an album. But he told us one time that Paul Simon was in there, and this has been probably 10 or 15 years ago, but he listened to whatever he was just working on or something he was working on. And he said, I wish everyone could hear the album in here, because this is what it's supposed to sound like. And, that's a great thing to hear. That makes you feel really good.
No doubt. Yeah. I kind of, it's a badge of honor that, I have people that I've developed their sound with. I've built their amplifiers, worked on their instruments, modified everything. Have been in the studio with them. Have been, with Bob Ludwig sitting next to them, while it's mastered. And then I come in here and I'm selling things using these same albums. Yeah. And people, if anybody questions, like, well, I don't think it really sounds like that, I can kind of go into my spiel. It's a unique thing, and the thing that really impressed me about being at Bob's place was one of our, as there's vast hallways just filled solid with gold and platinum records.
Yeah.
And one of our crew was going to use the restroom, and he walked into the wrong door, and it was a room full of like gold and platinum records that he didn't have room on the walls for. It's just like, what am I? This is amazing. So
yeah, the shelf with the Grammys is always the one that's just impressive.
Yep. Yeah.
It makes you realize where you are. It's pretty cool. We have another studio down in Atlanta called Sing Mastering, and if there's a somebody that's ready to take the torch from Bob, it's Colin down there, like that, and it's Atlanta, so he's in the hip hop world and the pop music world, but it's he's got a pair of Ivies in there in this room, and it's so much fun to be connected to that side of it, and to kind of get to talk to those guys about what they do and how what we do helps them. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. In Sing, are they also using cello amplifiers?
So he is using some cellos. You can tell who his idol was, but he had some Duntecs in there as well, and swapped over to the Ivies. I think we put him in about 3 or 4 years ago. So yeah, he's it's fun. And then the smaller studios are a lot of fun too. We've got a place up in Brooklyn that just has some mandras, but they're putting out a great amount of some alternative rock stuff that's just fantastic. And one thing I try to do every once in a while is try to gather together a bunch of music that's been mastered on the speakers and kind of put out a playlist or something that people if you're an owner, you can kind of check out what's been made on the speakers you own. It's kind of fun. No doubt.
So maybe just tell me a little bit about the product lineup, kind of what's in it, and how do you make the distinction between it just seems like it's different sizes for the most part, right? Except for when you get into the Vigintis and the Andras, but I just
so I guess about 3 years ago we kind of we looked at the line, and the line was pretty sprawling. Maybe it was about 5 years ago. The line was pretty sprawling. We had a lot of models, and it was a little confusing on the dealer level to try to remember all the models and to try to figure out what the difference was and what was the benefit of doing one. And we kind of had the philosophy back in the day, which is a typical philosophy. It's as you move up the line, you gain bass response, you get more drivers. That's a typical path. What we did about 3 years ago was take the whole line. We took out some of the models that seemed a little redundant and made 3 lines within the line. So we now have the Artisan series, the Statement series, and the Reference series. And the Artisan being the entry level, with the Nico, the Emma, and the Oso. And the Oso's brand new last year. But it's like the tree falling in the woods with no one around. It's like, if you have a new product and you don't have a show to go to, did it really happen? So we're still kind of holding back that we're going to be able to bring the Oso out.
Release all over.
Yeah. Do the release all over again.
Yeah.
But the philosophy, I think that idea of you just buy a bigger speaker, you get more bass. It never really sat right with me, because people would ask me, this is a whole other conversation, but people would always ask me who our competition was. Like, say, who's your competition for the Emma? Well, the Emma retails for $6,500. So my answer to that is everything else in the world that costs $6,500. It's not necessarily another speaker. So if someone's decided to spend $6,500 on our speaker, that speaker needs to be the best speaker at $6,500 it can be. So now we design speakers, whether that's the Nico or the Kiva or whatever. We're not trying to think, oh, well, you just designed a speaker that costs less than that one that has the same bass response. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't know that we're ever going to cannibalize a Kiva sale where somebody's going to say, well, I can save money and buy the Emma and have the same bass response. Maybe somebody would say that, but I don't think that really happens. But what does happen is somebody looks at an Emma and thinks, is this the best use of my money? I'm gonna get this speaker, and they went all out on their $6,500 speaker. Yeah. And so that's kind of where we are. Dividing the speakers up into those lines is more to help the dealers and more to streamline the line and give a little more clarity to the price points. So.
And I will say that everything you make sounds like an Egglestonworks speaker. I mean, no, duh, but right. I mean, it really does. I've obviously had the Nikos here, and being a smaller speaker, they image like mad. I never felt like, that's your smallest speaker. I never felt like I was at loss for bass. I mean, all of the seeds were there. Yeah,
there's definitely a house sound, so to speak. And it comes from, obviously, it comes from personal taste. Weighs into this. Types of components that are used and all of that. But our part of the reason I think that we get, and we touch into this in some of our marketing material, but some of the reason that I think the mastering engineers are attracted to our product is because of what they have to do practically. They have to sit in front of a pair of speakers for 10 hours, maybe more, work at a certain volume, not have fatigue, and enjoy the speakers. It's why a truly, a speaker that's aimed towards a mixing environment, you're not going to be able to sit in front of a speaker like that for 10 hours. And so it's kind of interesting to me that what a mastering engineer wants from a speaker is the same thing that a customer wants from a speaker. He wants it to be familiar and accurate, but he also wants to be able to sit there in front of it for a long period of time. And so when we aim towards those goals, it's not so much to do with the graphs. The graphs are a benchmark, but listening is definitely gets the final votes on where levels of tweeters go or mid-range crossover points or things like that. That all comes down to a gut thing, and so that's probably where this house sound thing comes from.
Well, I've never walked into any place and seen a pair of Egglestonworks, and there was a piece of tissue over the tweeter. So, you know, so can you walk me through the process a little bit of developing a speaker? I mean, there's a lot that goes into the acoustic chambers, the drivers, the components, and the balance.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of true of anything, but the OSO's maybe a good example. So, you know, at some point you decide, and I'm going to use the OSO because the OSO is not an upgrade of another model. It was a new model on the scene. Updating an existing model is a different process, and it's not quite as difficult as makes sense. But like with the OSO, we knew we wanted a flagship of the entry level line of the kind of the entry point line of that artisan thing. With the Nico, it already had the Nico, it had the Emma. We knew we wanted another speaker to be in there. So I mean, it's not the first thing you do, but one of the things you have to do is just decide what that price point is going to be, or what you think it should be. And some of that comes from dealer input. Some of it comes from, you know, looking at the market, figuring out what's out there and what's doing well, or what is, you know, where there's a void and where you might be able to fill in. And so once you decide a price point, then you can kind of back into that at whatever the factor is. Manufacturers do all kinds of different formulas, whether that's a 1-to-3 ratio or a 1-to-4 on cost to retail. It just depends on the company. But then you can back into how much it can cost you to make it, and that'll determine driver components. You know, how many, what woofer you're going to use, what the crossovers look like, what the cabinet looks like, what, you know, aesthetically this thing can be, and how much you can spend on it. Once you've kind of determined that, then it gets into the fun part of picking drivers, picking crossover topology and all of that. At this point, we've been around for 25 years almost. So some of that is a little automatic. We've been down some of these roads. We know where to go. But then again, things like the Vigenti, we used a slot port for the bass section, which we had never done before. We would always use a round port, or in some cases seal the cabinets. The slot port that went into the Vigenti, we now use it in every one of the new speakers that came after it. So the Nico, the Emma, the OSO, the Kiva, they all are using this. So when I'm not trying to contradict myself. I'm just saying that sometimes there are changes. We've been doing one thing for so many years, and we do something else, and we go, oh my gosh, that's incredible. Let's keep doing that. That's pretty great. So we're open to new ideas on that. But yeah, I mean, deciding on drive units is a process, and then deciding on box volume versus you know, loading and crossover componentry and topography and stuff like that. We use some software to do that. A program called Leap is really helpful to kind of narrow the choices down, so you don't have 1,000 iterations of something in a tremendous amount of time. You can plug in driver components and see what'll work good together and what won't.
How many prototypes do you make of each model before you're satiated? Is it?
It can vary. The Vigenti, I think we said the other day, we built 20 prototypes.
Wow.
And that's almost a finished product. When I say a prototype, I mean, it's not cosmetically perfect, but it's perfect. It's done enough that we can put a pair of them in a room and listen to them. So that one was a lot. You know, again, the Nico and the Emma, the current one, the Evo, those are improved versions of a previous model. So you don't really have as much to do on those as far as building prototypes.
When you're setting out to design a speaker, do you take into consideration kind of where it would sit in a room? Like, for example, I'd imagine rear porting versus front porting versus sealed box, et cetera, would allow you to have more or less distance from the rear wall.
Yeah. I mean, there is definitely some thought to that. the especially in the bass, the rear porting of the bass and the distance to the wall can reinforce or lessen it if you pull it back, things like that. On the Viginti and the Kiva and the bigger speakers like the Ivy and the Savoy, the mid range of those are vented to the rear, but it's not a port. It's just a vent, kind of like a transmission line, but it's a variation on that. So it allows doing certain things. Maybe we try to think of real world situations where a certain speaker design or a certain loading might sound great if we had it 40 inches off of the wall, but the reality of how many people in their homes can accommodate a speaker 40 inches off the wall is a lot less than the people who can't. And so, we would generally try to stay away from designing something that needed that kind of breathing room.
Wow. Tell me how the Oso is your first speaker with a side firing bass driver.
Yeah.
Tell me how that came about.
So part of that is a little form following function, and then some function, directing the form a little bit. But the goal was to make an Emma as full range as we could make it for a bigger room that would accommodate a bigger room while still maintaining kind of a sleek front baffle. So we could have probably managed to put an 8-inch woofer on the front. It's wide enough maybe for that, but aesthetically I didn't love it, and so putting it to the side, it opened up a lot of I guess more creative aesthetic choices we could have made, and it also I think it's also interesting. We've had some feedback from customers, where maybe the significant other doesn't care so much about this hobby as they do, and not having a huge array of woofers on the front of something is it's turned out to be kind of a positive. So everybody wins.
Does it affect where in the room you can place them?
So we they're mirror images of each other. So on one speaker, the woofer's on the right, and on the speaker, the woofer's on the left. So you can place them with the speakers pointing into each other, or you can switch them and put the woofers facing out. Typically that depends on overall width of the room or overall volume of the room. And there's no real hard and fast rule to it. We put a pair of speakers, we put a pair of them in our sound room. Our sound room is on the big side of a conventional room. It's probably 18 feet by 27 or 26 or something. But they want to be on the outside in that room. It just sounds better. It fills the room up. It's a bigger room. It has 10-foot ceilings. We put them in the offices of Fat Possum Records down in Oxford, Mississippi. And I thought, because it's kind of a bullpen office, they've got about 6 or 7 desks in there. I was like, oh, well, they'll go in the wall. They'll go out. That's the way. Just put them out, and they did it, and they put them facing the inside, and sounded better. So it gives you some flexibility that you don't have with a speaker that doesn't have that. So.
And you don't end up with phase cancellation or anything with them firing inward?
No, the way that the level that they're crossed over at is not going to induce any of that. We cross them over I think the woofer crosses over just at 100 hertz maybe, or a little below, but the mids are running full range at their bottom. So they are still active to about 60 hertz. They're not contributing a lot to output at 60 hertz, but they're still active way into the band of the woofers.
Right on. I think that's about all I have in terms of questions. Do you have anything you'd like to add, or anything I've missed?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we sure did. That was great.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on. It was really a pleasure. I guess I can throw kind of a little teaser out there that you and I are kind of kicking around and kicking around some prototypes, etc.
Yeah.
With kind of a little bit of a joint venture with Schroeder Amplification, seeing as I make tube amps for guitar players, etc. We've had some a prototype at least kind of come and go, and we have it out with some pretty cool people and getting some really good reviews so far. So hopefully things will pan out, and
yeah, we're real excited about that. That should be it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Likewise.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. And so just to let everybody know, this is a regular series for me, the live streams, where I obviously have super interesting guests, all from the music world. Next week, I have Dana Cacone, who owns the Church Recording Studio in Pittsburgh. He's an industry professional that has been around for a very long time, has managed significant bands, has incredible road stories. I mean, he's managed some of the most difficult people you can possibly imagine, and somehow managed to keep a fairly good edge. His recording studio is a converted church. I've done some shows there, and it's a phenomenal place, absolutely phenomenal place. And he continuously works on the space, has amazing guests and people who record there. So he'll have a lot to say, and a super good guy on top of that. So. And if anybody's interested, of course, in Egglestonworks Speakers, I would be happy to chat with them about it. I'm in the Chicagoland area, yeah, I guess that's about it. If my YouTube channel, where all of these live streams is housed, is Schroeder Vids, all one word, and you can check out this or any of the shows in the past that you may have missed. And with that, I bid everyone adieu. Thank you so much.